We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Live from the Visual Radio TV studios in Quincy, Massachusetts, it's We Talk Live with Curt Dalton from Cannabis.net and Jimmy Young from ProCannabisMedia.com.
Yeah, I want to actually give you guys.
Here we thought we were going to bring food to us. Like right now, now we get T-shirts.
So you said
a few articles on Cannabis.net about margin compression. You know, I think when this 2 to 3 years out, we're going to see the price of this flower come down, down, down.
Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to Weed Talk. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Curt Dalton from Cannabis.net.
Man, Curt, we got an amazing show tonight, and it's amazing that it actually came together in a short period of time as we were able to do it. You excited about this, Curt?
I think we have some great guests, some great content, and people are going to be very happy they're watching.
And we want to make sure, because we do have Dan McCarthy in the studio tonight, we want to make sure that we do get a few words in so that we too can enjoy this and people can hear everybody besides Dan. We do love that Dan McCarthy came here and actually saved this show and brought in a very special guest, and we're going to refer to him as David Y, and we'll explain in just a moment, because first I want to kind of give a highlight. We got some other stuff going on too, Curt.
Yep.
Tonight we've got a few interviews from Sensi Connect that was in Cambridge on Tuesday night, and we also have a little interview with a woman from New York City, Tribal Toke's Chief Marketing Officer, Kim B. Burns, and we'll be talking with her in between breaks. And, of course, later on, Hillary King will be joining us in studio as well. So that's what we got going. But first, let's talk about the people who support this venture. At least they do on this show on We Talk. And that means we're talking about legal seafoods. And remember, if it isn't fresh, it isn't legal. Some guests appearing on our show do get those gift certificates. And, check this out. This is Weejits. This jumped right ahead to Weejits. And we'll talk about Caroline's Cannabis. But check out what you're looking at. That's smoke, even though it looks like little bubbles. And it's the Weejit titration system. That's right. It starts when you flame up your bowl, which is on the left there. And the smoke goes right through these 4 chambers. It cools down the smoke from 1,300 degrees down to 80 degrees before it gets into your lungs. It takes out all the crap that you find in resin and on the inside of your bowls, and all that stuff gets filtered out. And the best part is it's washable. You can clean it right after every use. This is Weejits.com. And if you do decide to order something, weed, GETS.com. Use the promo code WeedTalk2020 and you'll get 10% off. So that's worth it. It's only like $40. It's a pretty cool deal. And I think, Curt, have you and I ever tried it together?
We had it in here a few weeks ago, and it was a really nice, very easily taken apart. You can actually clean it, and it has a very nice stem to it, if you would. It's not a hard thing to use. So
that's right. And it also fits pre-rolls, too, the filters on the pre-rolls. And we did see a flash of Caroline's Cannabis out of Uxbridge. We want to thank them, too. We'll be talking more about Caroline's
I want a prescription for a good
on. And let us go right now to our guests, and this will be fun because David Y is a chef.
Pro Cannabis Media.
Even though you're looking at Pro Cannabis Media's logo, but that's okay. David Y is a chef, and Dan McCarthy is a freelance writer, former editor of Sensi Magazine. And Dan, are we friends? Wait, are you? Can we put your microphone on? There you go. Now say it again.
Now? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, now we answer the question. Are we friends, Dan?
I'd like to think so. Yeah.
I'd like to think so too, and I appreciate you for being you and helping me out with this program tonight. But let's talk about David Y.
You're not going to attempt it? I mean, you can attempt it. There's no...
Go ahead, Jimmy. Attempt it.
All right. I'm the professional in the room. I think the Z is silent, so I'm going to go Yusefzadeh.
Yusefzadeh.
It isn't silent.
Yusefzadeh.
Yusefzadeh.
I'm going to go with Yusefzadeh.
Ding, ding, ding.
Curt, you win. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about David Yusefzadeh. He's a chief and food designer based in Boston, Massachusetts, of all places. And he spent the majority of his career in fine dining restaurants and hotels around the world. A couple of celebrity chefs that you might have heard of, because I know a lot of people watch the Food Network out there. Jean-Georges, Von Gerrit
Von Richten.
Yeah, that too. Von Richten.
Gotta go with
Mario
Von
Batali.
Richten.
That's right. Mario Batali. I can do that one. And Richard, is it Ekabus?
Ekabus, yep.
Ekabus, just few of the chefs that David has spent time with professionally. He is also now the CEO and founder of Cloud Creamery, a cannabis ice cream company based in Boston, because after all, New England eats more ice cream than any other place in the world. Don't know if you knew that. Just one of those stupid facts that I know. And, he also has eatsacrilegious.com events, which means he will cook for your event. Isn't that true, David?
That is very true. Yep.
Tell us how the heck you do this and how you got into the cannabis space, because that too is a pretty good story, and that's one of the things we like to do with Pro Cannabis Media is actually tell the stories of people in the cannabis space. So take it away, David.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Ultimately, we're able to do what we do because we have great friends. We have great support. Dan in particular, always helping, always serving at events, helping bring things together, whether it's last minute, whether it's properly organized. But as you know, anything that happens in the restaurant industry, something is always bound to go wrong. So having great support is really how we pull it off. So I can't pretend to take credit for where we've landed, but I spent my career in restaurants since I was 14. My first job, I was baking croissants from scratch with a very angry Vietnamese lady in a coffee shop, and I still remember her yelling at me. And I really love food. My parents are both great cooks. Neither one of them cook professionally, but I was always excited by what they were making. I always, was ready to eat. Holidays were a blast. My mom would always bake all types of cookies and bars and different things, and I wanted to help her. I have two older brothers. They were both, big into sports, and I wanted to cook with my mom. So I used to watch the Traveling Chefs of Europe on PBS, Pre-Food Network, and record it and really just, copy down recipes. And these guys were doing opening live scallops, lots of cooking techniques that were extremely advanced for a 9-year-old, but I was intrigued, and my parents saw that, and I think they really just facilitated, a little more energy into that. At Christmas they'd buy me, my mom bought me how to make bubblegum kit one year, and my dad bought me a book on how to bake bread. So they saw it, and they were really helpful, and they really,
bubblegum, bread, and cotton candy. Those are the three food groups, aren't they? I mean, come on.
That's Christmas.
Yeah, that's
exactly.
Christmas.
That's Christmas. Yeah, so it was a fun environment, and it was easy to learn in and great, and kind of went to culinary school out of high school. Got a great internship in Atlanta with an amazing chef named Ruben Garcia, who now runs the Masters tournament in Augusta, Georgia. And I think he really...
Whoa, hang a second. You just kind of floated through that a second here.
Yeah, the sports thing.
He dropped in the Masters golf tournament. Did you hear that? So
Jimmy's sports, spider sense just sent all the hairs up the back of his neck.
And by the way, I still have the recording of Tiger Woods, the final round on my DVR.
Oh, man, so I thought that was going somewhere else. I was like, come on. Now we got viral content.
Yeah, right.
So that time when he won, the cheering, I was cooking in tournament headquarters at the clubhouse, and we could hear the actual cheering from outside from the back patio. So it's not because of me, it's because of Ruben, but I think...
So wait a second, hang on a second.
Sure.
You have driven down, is it Marigold Lane? What's the lane? Is it
no, it's Magnolia.
Magnolia. I knew it was an M.
Yep. Many times. Got pictures right in the front.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, God, am I jealous of you. Holy... Do you need somebody to carry your gear and stuff like that?
I'm more of a mini golfer. I'm not... golf is... I enjoy
No. I was talking about kitchen utensils.
No, I understand.
I was looking for a way in. Is kind of where I was going on that.
It's shocking how the waiting list for tickets. It's really I didn't know. I didn't realize it was such a deep want.
My name's not on the waiting list. I'm just waiting for somebody to take care of me like America's guest.
I'll see what I could do. Yeah, I'll see what I can do.
Well, no, don't. I'm going to hold you to that, please, because that is on my bucket list. Dan McCarthy, amazing enough. We've kept you somewhat quiet over the first few minutes here. How did you get to know David? And tell me about what you've been doing, because I know you've actually been in New Hampshire on the political trail.
That's right. So David and I connected a couple years back while I was running, when I launched the Boston edition of Sensi Magazine, the national cannabis sort of city-based regional lifestyle publication. And while doing stories for Sensi and kind of being in each other's orbit. And he actually slowly came in and did some stuff with some of our events. As I moved on from Sensi and wound up working for a while with Cannapreneur Partners, which is that local cannabis investment holding company, an entrepreneurial sort of connector firm. David, actually, I tapped into him when I was sort of tasked with doing a bunch of events for the investor community and connecting different operators and investors. So in order to sort of try to move the needle and make some new waves in the way a lot of these perfectly acceptable, perfectly enjoyable, networking events that really kind of pop up all over the city within the cannabis community, especially as the cannabis community more and more is not only being normalized, but it's really starting to be accepted, and there's a lot more overlap in traditional business services and business type networking events. So as we began to form some of the early ones through 2019, and at the end of 2019, I grabbed David and his team and had them provide food for one of our investor events. I got into a video. Now, what happened from there is the more and more David and I started to work around each other, and he started tapping into different things I was writing or different projects I was getting into. There was just a lot of overlap, both in terms of sort of personal philosophies, business philosophies, and exactly where, a lot of people are in the cannabis industry right now, which is that this is an ascendant industry, okay? And everybody's grasping for their piece to varying degrees. Some people are carving out pieces within media and content. Some people are trying to be just a cultivator and dispensary outfit. Some are ancillary services. Some are trying to carve out new portions of traditional services like being a CPA or accountant services and say, hey, I'm the closest that's maybe come to solving traditional accounting services in the age of the dawn of banking services for the industry. So as we began to work more and more in each other's circle, and now that I'm more in just pure what I've been doing for 15 years, contract work and floating around, he works in orbit with me. So as I begin to do stuff and get more involved in the different side projects I've been doing for years, like the Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism, bingeonline.org, where we just had dispatched over 24 reporters for close to 40 different pieces of content and features of covering the entire campaign trail, pretty much like nobody else covers it, where a lot of people are concerned with the horse and pony show, the dog race elements of it, the sort of regurgitated aspects of the news. We covered that, and I worked in some of the actual drug policy and drug policy reform coverage that people in Massachusetts are looking for that are also involved in the cannabis space, and I've already gotten David plugged in with that network as we begin to expand out his Eat Sacrilegious high-end gourmet cannabis-infused dinner series.
Take a breath, will you please?
He's good at that.
He can carry it.
Yeah.
So
Curt, go ahead.
What does Cloud Creamery make specifically with cannabis, and where can someone get it? Start with that.
So we make our flagship products are ice cream and sorbets. We have established Cloud Kitchen, which will be our parent company, where you can have an array. But we're definitely starting with ice cream and sorbets. We are not available in any stores yet. We are waiting for the last part of we're waiting for our provisional license. We've been in the queue for about 9 months now, 8 months, 8.5 months. So we're hoping any day now, but as we all know, there's no definitive timeline for when that'll actually come through. But
in fact, it's a store. Some friends, Wicked Chronic, have been asked to cease and desist actually selling some of their CBD stuff.
Interesting.
In their items, and it's out of their store now.
Right.
But
why is it? Because
Town of Natick said, well, you know what? You got to comply. You can't. They're just. You know what it is? It's freaking town council people and city council people just saying, "Oh, we can do this because we are the city council. We got to preserve
it." Or just
no. Their oils are still there and all that stuff. Their T-shirts are still there. Everything. It's just infused in food.
Oh,
and right, David. And that's a no-no. Right now, that's a no-no. It's a stupid no-no. Okay, it really is.
It's managed poorly. It really comes down to poor management, in my opinion, from the top. And I don't want to put all the blame on the CCC because there's lots of things that they are being held to. But I moved here from Illinois, and the Chicago market already is just its trajectory is going to put us to shame. And frankly, it's embarrassing. There's a lot of people that need a lot of food, that need a lot of cannabis through food to help them digest. People like myself that are going through Crohn's disease, and we can get to that. But it's really beneficial to balance nausea, help people get their day started right. And if you can get good rest and have a good diet, you're really in the best place to battle anything that's coming your way. So it's amazing that flower and all these things were legal first. Frankly, it's baffling, but it's a business, and I think we all just have to remember that our generation is here to clean up a lot of things that have gone. That
my generation is screwed up. It's okay.
And before you.
Yeah.
It's not all on you.
I appreciate that.
It started, in the Industrial Food Revolution, but I really think that we are here to communicate the benefits and really, point out with our technology that there's so many federal research projects that showed positive results that were not funded by the federal government. And we're happy to do it.
You mentioned right now the federal government is just non-operational, okay? And later on in the show, we're going to be talking with Morgan Fox from the NCIA because, well, I don't need to get into politics, but we all know how I feel about politics. And the fact that they still haven't passed the Safe Banking Act out of the Senate is just bizarre to me. And I had an incident personally for my company where a bank, and I'm going to name them, Santander, shut down my business account, and they took my personal account down too. Why? Because I took cannabis money from a member association that is not selling it out the door. They're just a member association. Anyway, I'm really mad, and now I have found a very friendly credit union in Rhode Island, Greenwood Credit Union, where I will be doing my banking. So there. Anyway, what did it take me? 15 minutes to do that?
That's not bad.
I was horrible. Anyway, what do they call that? I popped my cannabis financial cherry, I guess, because people have gone through this. I mean, Curt, you like that, Dan?
I do.
You like that?
Yeah.
Curt, you've gone through that.
Yeah, we've had merchant accounts shut down for us, just because of the name.
Right, just because
we don't sell anything with THC, and we were shut down. So,
And
welcome to the club.
And David, your experience with any banking issues or anything like that?
We are working with Gardner Federal Credit Union, and
we love Tina Sprague. We love that
Tina,
group.
Yep,
I wish they would have returned my calls.
Tina,
I would have worked bent, but whatever.
They're busy, and they've been more than kind to us and extremely thoughtful. I think the management there, they are aware of what is coming, and I think they're making the right steps to get themselves in place. It's never, there's lots of work to be done on all fronts. However, I think their heart's in the right place, and they're working on it. So. That's
good. I think, look, it's great that the people in the credit unions are working on it and giving the break, if you will, open. Sure. And they have this policy and this questionnaire that I had to answer before my account was opened and all that.
Right.
And it's definitely put in a special category in the bank. I found that out this week when I tried to make a deposit at a affiliated federal credit union. But, it was like, oh, no, you got to tell us you're going there first before you go. And I'm like, okay, I'll figure it out. It's all a workaround. We're still part of a very early stage, huge industry, right, guys? And patience is built into you if you're in this industry. Don't you think?
It's a marathon, not a race.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, you've been in the queue for 8 months with not a lot of communication on, hey, you're 2 more weeks, you're ready to. You're just like, could be tomorrow, might be in 3 months.
Zero communication.
That's tough to do.
And we don't have any retail space. We're a manufacturer, so no one is coming into our storefront. So our security measures, everything is. I mean, in general, I think much more straightforward than what a dispensary would have to go through. But in addition to that, I've opened 6 restaurants. My business partner has opened 2. So between us, our food safety, our track record, this is what we do. We're just merging cannabis in as another ingredient. So we were hoping that would leverage some credibility in our, being tasked with providing something safe and nutritious, but it really doesn't seem to matter.
Infused into a food, are you worried about the FDA at a federal level, even if you got a state clearance?
I mean, there's a couple answers here. So the FDA, with all due respect, needs more inspectors, to say the least. They can't cover. There's restaurants that get passing grades that should not have passing grades, and I'll spare you on that. But I don't believe that they are given the tools to do what they need to do properly, in fairness. So I hesitate to put it all on them, but I don't know that, frankly, most people that are in cannabis policy seats really have any idea of what's actually going on, because none of them are on the ground talking to us. And so to your point, in a roundabout way, the communication, in my opinion, should be constant. We should be ping-ponging back and forth all these things to make it as best as it possibly can be for our patients.
So the NCIA, the National Cannabis Industry Association, they're actually having a show next week in Boston, their Northeast Cannabis Business, and we'll be talking with Morgan Fox about that. But I know that they've put out a multi-page policy paper to share with those who are governing, okay, to enlighten them and tell them about what is going on in the trenches, if you will, and how they might want to think about creating their policies. And so, and it's frustrating because it's falling on deaf ears because the FDA, they're clueless. It's sad. It just
and I think that's why that's what I meant earlier with our generation is more of the avenues we're taking to make changes. I think we have to really stop asking and really start making some demands. So,
absolutely,
it's a little too late for these things.
Can I tell you who I blame on this?
Sure.
It's Mitch McConnell, and the reason why is he was the one who got the farm bill through the Senate, okay, and signed his little paper with his hemp pen, not realizing that in hemp there is CBD, okay, and he didn't understand what CBD was. He thought it was CVS, I think.
You might have.
Right? That's a consumer value store, kind of the big chain. Sorry, I had to do it. And it's Pandora's box. Once that opened, everybody's like, hey, check this out. We got a non-intoxicating chemical in the cannabis sativa plant that we can actually infuse in different food items. Ooh, and it's not going to make you intoxicated. Ooh, and there's nothing negative about this. Ooh, so why are they dragging their feet? Because they want a piece of it.
Well, I think
they want a piece of it.
I mean, we approve lots of chemicals that are in food that are extremely harmful to all humans, especially the youth in every fast food restaurant. And I've spent, my education, my graduate degree is in U.S. food policy. So we've gone through lots of different context, even from what used to be food stamps and SNAP, what it's turned into SNAP, and kind of what people can buy with these things, and how they weren't able to buy vegetables and or diaper with them, but they were allowed to buy 2 liters of Coca-Cola. So there's a whole. It's not. There's you peek behind the curtain. It's ugly, but we vote with our dollar. So frankly, when you go buy cannabis at certain dispensaries, when you go buy certain products, you're advocating for it. And I think people really need to switch their mentality of who they're supporting.
Oh, goodness gracious. Isn't that the truth? And speaking of support, Dan, you were right in the trenches. Again, a few things. I still can't believe that I've lived to see the day that cannabis is a legal product in my home state. But the fact that it is a political issue in an election year, and we're seeing incredible movement in states like Kentucky today, I'm pretty sure, move forward with it. New Hampshire now, I believe you can pass the House where you can now grow it. Okay, so we're making a lot of progress. The green wave is continuing to evolve here, and it's part of the political scene. I'm sure when you were right in the middle of it up in New Hampshire, you got some feedback about how people, are you pro-cannabis, anti-cannabis? Are you pro-hemp, anti-hemp? You tell me.
Well, I mean, the campaign trail is the great equalizer, right? Because what's happening in particular in New Hampshire, because of the timing between Iowa and the subsequent primaries, New Hampshire, and people will continue to debate, and I hope so, the outweighed importance of the New Hampshire primary. But the reason why the New Hampshire primary really sets a new precedent in each cycle is that it gets people up close and personal with these candidates, right? Everybody famously remembers what happened in '92 when James Carville enacted the town hall that gave younger Bill Clinton the ability to spring off those stools and directly go address and do his Clinton thing right in the eyes of the voters, where George Bush Sr. is checking his watch and has creaky knees at that point. The ability to actually interact with the electorate is what draws people to the circus that rolls through town every 4 years. And while out there, I mean, just very naturally talking to people about what and how they feel about cannabis legal reform, but more specifically as it relates to their own lives in the Granite State. And you'd be surprised how many people aren't following. It's just sort of out in the ether. So when you're like, yes, just recently by voice vote, they passed it in the House legislature that therapeutic use home grow is going to be allowed. People have no idea. Yet on the flip side, that same person who is a voter registered in a upper middle class affluent suburb north of Boston in the southern part of the state that was going to predominantly go to Pete Buttigieg, he has his own plan, which some say could be revolutionary, some say is absolutely ridiculous. That it was called the Plan B plan of cannabis reform by this particular candidate, which was to properly use, in his own words, in his own ideas, Air Force One as a vehicle to fly into the home districts of any congressional lawmaker creating a roadblock for full wide-scale legalization, to basically educate them on what they don't know. Okay. Now, this is in contrast to now the eventual leader of the Democratic frontrunner Bernie Sanders, who his whole plan was to, legalize on day one by presidential decree. Now, that's wonderful sentiment. Has a whole other construct of legal issues around it.
Right.
But at least there is a clear and present plan laid out, where then you had the other sort of members of the field in different hemming and hawing, wrapping it up into larger scale criminal reform plans, which also comes back to Mayor Pete on the campaign trail. Anytime he was given a sort of specific question about plans for legalization, he would regurgitate some kind of platitude, and then usually in his case refer to his policy, which is this thing called the Douglas Plan, named after Frederick Douglass. And the ostensible plan is to basically elevate and empower all of Black America from all different spectrums of life, but wrapped into that is comprehensive crime and penal reform, and within that the disproportionate amount of people of color that have been arrested for low-level non-violent cannabis possession crimes, which puts them in the boondoggle of forever being within the penal system, which can now extend to the other billionaire trying to get into politics, Mike Bloomberg, who of course with his stop and frisk program, that was part and parcel of a wide-scale racial profiling law enforcement platform in New York City that now he's backtracking on, and he's the same mayoral entity and now presidential candidate that said medical marijuana was a hoax. Like the passage of medical marijuana itself, the concept of medical benefit to cannabis, was a hoax.
Do you see the red light?
I do. What is that?
This is a new thing. It's a 1 minute warning sign before we take.
Is that when the bombs fall? I've seen The Day After Tomorrow. Is this the alert?
This is the alert, and basically we don't want to go over a certain amount of time, so that the simulcast that we are providing to the Investor News Channel down in Florida won't get screwed up. That's pretty much what it comes down to.
Great.
And I give Mike Zotos, our technical person here, it's his studio, and to put in also more bells and whistles, and I bet you like the bells and whistles
and lights. Bells, whistle, lights.
Bells, whistles, and lights. And of course, this is We Talk. I'm Jimmy Young, your host from Pro Cannabis Media. Curt Dalton is here, and Dan and Dave are here as well. And we're going to have more of this show coming up in just a little while. And in the second half hour, we've got a very special phone guest with a gentleman who's going to tell us about a product that can detect what is hemp and what is cannabis sativa. Okay? That's coming up. Don't go away.
A philosophy of you can't pronounce it and it's not from nature, we're not putting it in our products. And then from there, we kind of decided, well, I've been a Pilates instructor for over 20 years. I love fitness, and I decided that we should really launch some wellness products as well. So Tribe Tokes grew to Tribe Brands, and we've been going strong in New York City ever since.
Do you support more regulation in your industry?
I do support more regulation in some ways, but I'm also very specific. We have to make our regulation affordable. And so that small businesses like myself, I'm a woman business, and my business partner, I work really hard, and we would want to keep doing this, but we're also scared that our government is going to make regulation out of our reach, and that's really effed up, and that's what concerns me. As far as health regulation, I don't believe in over-regulating, but I think it's really important to list all of the things that are there, to have lab testing, to have batch testing. It's important. There are a lot of CBD companies out there, and I won't name them, but they're getting sued for not actually even real CBD in there, synthetic marijuana and CBD products. It's disgusting, and I want to expose that. That's not okay. We work very hard, and we have a high-end product, and we're not able to cut our margins because we're not filling or lying. So I hope our government can see that small businesses is the culture. The traditional market was the market before there was legalization, before any of this happened. So anybody that's been in the business for more than 5 years understands that it's a cultural thing too. So I think we should honor some of that as well.
So now's the time to put on my headset again, right? All right, welcome back to We Talk, everybody. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, alongside...
.net.
There you go.
Oh, there we go. We're back.
Say that again.
Curt from Cannabis.net. We're on.
There he goes. And one of the most popular websites in the world of cannabis is Cannabis.net. That was Kimby Burns. She's out of New York City. She hosts a podcast. She works for a CBD company. You saw Tribal Tokes. You can check that out for you. And we'll be having the entire interview on an upcoming edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young, the podcast that really started this whole pro cannabis media thing way back in March of 2018 at NECANN. And since we're talking about NECANN, the New England Cannabis Convention, I'm going to tease the guests for next month because Mark Shepard and Jeff Lawrence, the two founders of that, the two principals, have agreed to come in about a week before their big show, which is the biggest show at the Heinz. And Curt, I know you've got some experience going to some conventions. NECANN is still the giant.
It is for Massachusetts. I think they were first boots on the ground maybe 6-7 years ago. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's grown to, boy, if you've been to the Heinz in Boston, it's now both rooms, the hallways, and honestly, when other shows come in, we have an events page at Cannabis.net, so I know when the Boston shows and other brands come in, NECANN, for New England, at least, is the industry standard here.
There you go. All right, let's bring back in Dan and David here. And in just a few minutes, we'll be talking to Greg Giuntini, who has this really cool product, guys. I don't know. Have you ever heard of this thing? It's brand new to the market. It's taking off. Obviously, law enforcement loves it. But it's a product. It's a doohickey, okay, that is also an app on your phone that just in case you got a big truck full of hemp and you're stopped by law enforcement, you can actually show them, test it right on the spot. You see, there's no THC in this green plant that looks like cannabis sativa, and it is. I call hemp impotent weed. Is that accurate? What do you think, guys? Is that because I don't like to use the M word?
Is that what it does for you, Dan?
I don't like to use the word marijuana. I just don't. I mean, it's a horrible word that means nasty things, and I just don't want.
I think millions of men have called it that about midnight and across this country on certain nights. So,
although it really depends on body type, like everything within cannabis. I mean, right. I've talked to several middle-aged men that came to cannabis late in life, and said this is the special Spanish fly root they were looking for.
The little blue pill of the green plant.
I mean, you know what I mean. If it's natural, then it works.
Right.
Hey, if it works, you don't knock it, right? All right, David. What do we got? Dan, have we got Greg on the line? Not yet. 1 minute.
Me?
We will in 1 minute. No. I'm going to David. I'm going back to David because we've got about a minute.
Sure.
If I wanted to hire you for a private event, how would I go about doing that?
Yeah, usually, either our website or Instagram is kind of the best way to get started. We typically, we want to really evaluate what event you're looking to do. For us, high quality food is number one. Cannabis is, merging into that. So if you're asking us to come, make some cheeseburgers and grill some hot dogs for you, we might not be the right group. But if you'd like something that's thoughtful, curated, really built around an experience, we are absolutely the people for that. So Instagram is a great vehicle. It's really something where lots of people we from all different walks, events we've done in other states can kind of reach us and connect. Typically, it's a quick email, usually a quick phone call, and take it from there. But
is Cloud Creamery the Instagram account? Just tell people.
Cloud Creamery is Instagram.
Okay,
account,
Cloud Creamery, Instagram.
Okay.
Quick email.
I feel like we should slide this around.
How many courses are we getting?
Oh,
how many when you
we
do
have
a
some stuff here.
We do. Show everyone what it is. What do we have
no
here?
No THC product. Let's make sure we understand that. We're not drinking on the air either here.
Okay.
It's a little loose. I've been out all day running errands, but it's in a freezer bag with some packs. So if
it's soft ice
reach
cream.
In the center, you'll get a scoop. But it's.
So if someone books you for a cannabis-based dinner,
right.
We talking every course with cannabis. Explain to people
what
do they expect at their house.
Sure. We typically, and part of the initial conversation is really gauging your cannabis use or your,
and you talk to everybody at the party, right?
Correct.
Individually, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, we talk to everyone at the party. We talk to everyone individually. It's a salted caramel.
Salted caramel. Is this ice cream or sorbet?
It is ice cream.
So there's cream in this.
Yep.
Now there's a finger in it.
There are
well,
spoons.
That just ruined it for everybody.
I was like, you guys can have it, guys.
There we go. So it is a little loose just because it hasn't been in the freezer as long. So don't worry about that. But you can see the consistency. It looks very ice creamy. And I may be a regular at Richardson, so we'll see how this compares. So.
All right, so while he's tasting the ice cream, I believe we have our interview. It's good, isn't it?
Oh, that's good. It's got a little salty to it, too.
Well,
It's
salty.
delicious.
It's
salty caramel.
Salt caramel. That's the flavor, Dan.
All right.
Come on. Kurt, what's
But
the deal?
wait. This is the ice cream. Tell me if I want you to come to my house and use cannabis in a meal. We talking appetizers with cannabis and
Everything
everything?
start to finish. Yeah, usually we do a mocktail, so we don't serve any alcohol. So usually there's a mocktail infused with terpenes, just to kind of get you going.
Good that you would mention the fact you don't serve alcohol because we know that's an 8 times is situation, and we don't need to get into that. However, we do need to get into how do you tell the difference between hemp and potent cannabis? So we have impotent cannabis, which is hemp, or potent cannabis. And I believe we have Greg Giuntini, the Director of Market Development at Detechachem. And Greg, are you there?
I'm there. Hey, good job with the last name. It's about 1 in 100 that nails that.
Thank you very much.
That kind of night, believe me.
Yeah, but I'm afraid of the other guy in the studio here, David, but that's another story. Greg, tell us a little bit about Detechachem. How cool is this product, and how is it taking over as far as what law enforcement is always asked for when they stop a big old trailer truck that's filled with hemp and they want to arrest the driver because he's got weed. He's got potent cannabis in his truck. No, he has hemp in his truck. So let Greg stop. You could just eat a little bit and let Greg talk. Go ahead, Greg.
There's a lot of good talk about ice cream and such. So I like that. It's a good primer. But yeah, the company is Detechachem. We've been around since 2005. We're based in Houston, Texas, and our whole game's been on the law enforcement side and the military side, doing trace explosive detection and trace drug detection, and we're used by every federal agency in the U.S. and hundreds of state and local law enforcement, bomb squad, military groups. But yeah, the CBD THC thing for years. We had a THC kit, is a very well known chemistry, a Duquesne Levine chemistry that has been scientifically able to determine THC, but as you guys know, every law enforcement guy in the country was saying, well, that's our problem. We've got a truckload of what looks like marijuana, and they're telling us it's hemp, or vice versa, or from an agricultural standpoint, what we heard about a lot is DEA and such, that they'd be legally growing hemp, but then illicitly they'd have a quarter acre in the back of one of their many acres where they're growing marijuana and selling it illicitly, or making hash oil or something out of it, which is big bucks. And there's no way to field test it. There's no way to field test and differentiate the two. So our company, we got enough requests where a lot of the other chemistries that we do are based off NIJ standards that have existed since the 70s. So we had to create a completely custom chemistry to be able to do this, because they're both, as you guys know, they're close chemically. The indoles are close together. So a lot of the previous tests would it doesn't matter if it was CBD or THC, it would just come up as a cannabinoid. So we basically had to just take thousands of samples from different states, different types of CBDs, different concentrations on THC side as well, and create a chemistry that could really differentiate the two, and it came out really well. So when you use this $4 field test and you swab anything that has CBD content or THC content, even hybrid material, it can not only differentiate what's CBD and what's THC, but it can show you a hybrid of the two. And arguably most important from a law enforcement perspective was it can also differentiate if it's above the 0.3% legal limit for THC, because that was another huge thing from a grow perspective, making sure it's harvested before it converts over above the limit, and then also for trafficking and with customs and such. So it's been a huge product. We launched this in October last year at the Chiefs of Police conference in Chicago, and we sold thousands of kits the first week, and it's been just escalating from there.
Well, they certainly have the budget for it, and I'm glad that they're actually finding this product, because it was one of the more frustrating things that happened after my pal Mitch there signed the farm bill with his hemp pen, not realizing that he was opening up a Pandora's box. And I believe it was even within 2 weeks, a huge trailer truck, I want to say that it was going to Idaho maybe, and it was filled with hemp. And then the guy, they got it absconded from them because they said, nope, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So I'm
Did you hear
glad.
about that big thing with NYPD? They had 128 pounds of, they thought it was marijuana, but it was hemp, and it was a whole mess. And they use our stuff too, but I guess they didn't use it that day.
I was just going to say, it might not be the one you want to put on the billboard.
Yeah.
That's right. They already screwed that up.
Story on that. That's pretty funny.
That's a perfect example. I mean, that's a perfect example of why the kid's needed.
Greg, this is Dan McCarthy. Nice to meet you. I had a quick question. So, I'm always interested in the advancement of these kinds of technologies, and in particularly then get interested, especially, sort of the journalist in me, thinking about the ways in which you're working, across state lines and across agencies, particularly within law enforcement. So just out of curiosity, when the field kit test, it's called Mobile Detect, is that right?
That's the app. That's the free app. And then there's separate drug test pouches that the app analyzes the color. So
Got it.
Two things together, yeah.
Okay, so in the case of the app, right? I'm sort of a hound and very obsessed with security and data security. So, I read something sort of in advance of this, and while you guys the product can look at the THC content that registers above 0.3%, but after it does that, it says it's something like it generates and sends out probable cause reports, photos, GPS mapping, that sort of thing. Have you guys on your side, has there been any documented cases of false positives of something where something got tagged as THC and then it went through and actually in fact it wasn't, and how did that sort of troubleshooting take place after that?
Mm-hmm. So I can tell you we have not heard of, I can't say it's never happened, but we have not been, and we're usually told, we have not heard of a time where there's been a false positive or false negative on CBD and THC, and I think the product's great, of course, but it's been out since October, so maybe that will come up. But when we did, since, like I mentioned, we had to make a custom chemistry here, we, of course, try to break it because we need the stuff to be as accurate as possible. So we tried to run everything we possibly could that might hit on a false positive. So I haven't seen it yet, and hopefully we won't. But the touching back on the probable cause reports, you don't have to use the app. The kits can work like the old-fashioned field test kits where you just look at the color and you make the determination. But the app is a free app basically to generate those PC reports where it takes a picture of the reaction, it GPS maps it, time, date stamp, officer ID, custom note fields, and then you hit one button in the app and it generates a PDF report instantly that you can text or email directly from your phone. So a lot of agencies will put together an SOP where they set up an evidence alias, evidence at xypd.com, and as soon as they get any drug result, they can send it out immediately and put it in a repository. And it's a stronger piece of PC. The attorney's not saying, well, have you had your eyesight checked, and where were you, and did you keep the kit? And if they can punch a hole in something, they will. So we basically reverse engineered this from what we knew a defense attorney would try to poke holes in. So that's been hugely successful, especially for the app being free.
I was going to say, Greg, this is Curt from Cannabis.net. You walked right into my next question and saying, since October, it's been out. Has it been challenged in court? Has someone either overturned it or has a department used it for a conviction? And a judge has said, yes, this is the gold standard, or this is true.
I can tell you that the chemistry used has been validated by two very large federal agencies that I won't name, but you could probably guess. And it has not been upturned, and it has not been challenged.
Well, that's a good thing.
As far as I know of.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as I know.
And now, I'm gonna. One of the first things when I first heard about this product, law enforcement is really looking to do their jobs, and they need tools to do their jobs. And this is obviously handing them one that can help them do their jobs. But the first thing I thought of was this is a test of the plant. It's not of a person who might be under the influence of. Correct.
Correct. And I was actually just in Colorado, Department of Agriculture 2 weeks ago, and they were saying, "Can you guys figure out a breathalyzer for for cannabis, and everyone wants that. But you're correct; it does not do that.
Thank goodness. I'm sorry. It's just how I feel.
As long as it's not that breathalyzer that went around the internet over the last month or so that has the single most ridiculous image you've ever seen of the guy that has this huge rhinoceros horn of, have you guys seen this thing where you hook it up to your nose and apparently it's a piece of tech that allows you to like register the actual THC in the air. This was actually on, I think it was Business Insider or something. And anyway, whatever the tech may or may not be and how it may or may not work, it just begs to be lampooned. So whatever tech you do develop, make sure you keep the optics in mind.
Greg, just curious, is your company the company when you go through the TSA line and they pick you out and they swab your bag with a little alcohol? Are you the Detechachem guys up there? You're that guy? You're the guy that makes us do that?
Yes, I'm literally there in line.
Yeah. All right, good. You're that guy that's checking my bag for, I guess, explosives residues.
I'm the guy that needs the secondary and third pat down for you. Yes.
And you're not looking for any cannabis. You're looking for explosives at that point. So.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But yeah, it's a good extension of our product line because we've had our fentanyl, coke, meth, synthetic kits out for a long time. So this was the first new kit we've put out since our fentanyl kit. So
I bet with federal legalization and crossing a state line, you're in a very nice position right now. So good for you.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's funny. We even have police departments that, even though CBD stuff is legal, they just don't want their cops to be using CBD products. So they'll test their own guys on CBD material. So there's a lot of interesting markets for it. And it's the first product we've put out that has had a big consumer purchase, because we don't have any restrictions on who we let buy our stuff. And then obviously all the other kits have been law enforcement and such, or first responders. But, every day it's, XYZ, Hayes Incorporated and all these types of things. So interesting.
Well, before you go, I believe we have some video, Mike, that takes us through the process and actually sees the process. And I wonder if you can, I don't know if you're monitoring this on the internet, but walk us through a little bit about how this stuff works. It's talking about hemp and CBD products, and you're able to actually fill the need of what the law enforcement folks do.
Yeah, so I know the video you're referring to. Yeah, so it's easy. So the kits are little field test kits, and they have a removable swab inside the kit. So you would remove the swab from inside the kit. There's a little application end. All you have to do is, this is a residue test. This isn't even a bulk material test. So you just have to, in that video, rub it onto some of the bud. One of the pieces of bud is hemp. The other bud is marijuana. And then you insert the swab back into the kit. You manually crack the 2 ampules on the side that have these custom chemistry reagents. Their chemical reagents flow down to the bottom. They make contact with the swab. They saturate it, and they will turn a color. It'll turn either a reddish for CBD, or it'll turn blue for THC. So you can be done there manually, but then if you use the app, you'll notice there's a QR code on every single pouch. All the app does is it looks at the QR code and it looks at the color reaction at the same time with your camera, phone or tablet. And so all it's really doing is registering the pouch with a specific ID. Everyone has a specific ID, and then it looks at the color reaction, and if the hues fall within a certain scale, it makes the determination. And on the THC side, depending on the concentration, the darker the blue, there's a threshold where it can tell if it's above that 0.3%. So it just, our technology, we call it automated color metrics, and that's what it is. It automates it for you, and it takes an algorithm based against DEA standards. We hold a DEA license, so it makes a very highly validated legal determination of the color.
Fair enough. Hey, Greg Giuntini, Director of Market Development of Detechachem, I really appreciate you calling in tonight. I understand you are a New Englander. You're in New Hampshire.
New Hampshire, yes, sir. Been a busy week.
Yeah, I've heard. I think something's been going on up there. Anyway, really appreciate you taking the time. That video was awesome, and so was your interview. So again, thank you again, and we'll look for this in our law enforcement logs, I guess.
I hope I never see your product up close,
That's
but
right.
Congratulations.
I don't know how to take that, but
right,
yeah, thank you.
It looks like it works, so no thanks.
It's a working product. Thanks so much. I appreciate it, Greg. All right.
Thanks, Greg.
So that, guys, I mean, now I got to ask you, again, what's your reaction when you see something like that? To me, it's serving a purpose, yes?
Dan.
I mean, it's serving a purpose, yeah, but I mean, again, this is, as you mentioned earlier in the show, we're at the dawn of an industry, and there are a lot of, what was interesting from what one of the things I heard was that he'd already actually, had a technology based on swapping for fentanyl and some of these other compounds. And, it sounds like they've worked out something for both THC and CBD. I'd like to see field test data. I'd like to see it in the hands of people that understand the plant at the molecular level. I'd like to see if it understands the difference between root cannabinoids and not. I'd also just like to see the ability for which something like that is a cutting-edge technology that is coming from outside the cannabis world, trying to understand and then have applicability to the cannabis world. Right. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying I'd like to see what that data looks like and what that legitimate field test looks like over a very wide berth, because I think there is... I just think any new tech coming into the industry right now, especially anything that is basically saying this thing is going to give conclusive results for X, so that the specific intent is something regarding law enforcement, counter-enforcement, whatever the case may be, I always walk very carefully into that, and I know a lot of people in the legacy industry do as well. It's one thing if this is something coming from the cannabis industry that's been working on these different tests so they can understand genetics better, or they could better splice something within the hemp plant for crop creation. I just think any tech like that, I want to see a lot of field test about it.
Would you ever have a use for that in your world?
I would have a use for it specifically because I stopped taking all synthetic medications. So for me, cannabis use is not just reactionary. I don't wait for a flare up from Crohn's disease and then treat it. I use it preventatively. So I think it would be useful to measure the same way you measure your blood sugar, different diabetes tests. If you can measure your, more or less think of loading cannabis, right? Over a 3-day period, you're taking XXX milligrams, so it's in your blood constantly, keeping certain inflammation from growing in intestines and in your stomach. I think it'd be really helpful to wake up every day and take a breath and acknowledge, be able to understand what's currently in your body from whatever, if you went to the gym or you went for a run and you could tell, you sweat it out what's in your body. I think it'd be really helpful to know, just to keep the level that you want consistently.
And kind of like Dan said, and the reason I asked him that question is, the Leafly article that David Downs did about the lab shopping and how a supplier can go to different labs and get readings all different, and he chooses the highest THC. And the thing I thought of was so all these labs with these scientists aren't getting it right, and they have the thing right there. They can work on it for 3 straight days, and and he solved it. He can tell you 0.3 above or below, and it just seems like, well, wait a minute, why can this group of scientists that Leafly showed, hey, take a sample to 3 different labs, you'll get a different reading, but his, which I'm not saying his product doesn't work in a 50,000-foot level to say, okay, but all of a sudden he's dead on at 0.3 above or below. And I just wonder, that's why I asked him, has this held up? Has anyone said, there is no history to this test, sir? Right. You're throwing it out. So,
yeah. I mean, and this isn't to disparage whatever he's doing either. I'm very cautious at the early days of the pre-days of federal legalization. Right, we're not even quite at the early days of that. Yep. I'm just, because of so much activity within the industry, so much settling of the tectonic plates of the industry as it continues to kind of get lock and step. There are missteps. For every 2 steps forward, the Safe Banking Act, and then the MORE Act, which rolled in the Safe Banking Act, and then all of the elements of criminal record expungement and all of the other aspects of social justice restoration. While that was a big moment forward, and it did have the kind of support it needed, as of yesterday, I read a story that top congressional GOP lawmakers thanked the Banking Services Committee for not pushing the MORE Act through or making a priority, especially during the impeachment trial, because that would have created new avenues up. The point being is this: there is so much activity happening that, almost taking the Buddhist approach of, if somebody says they figured it out, chances are that's a very pejorative way of looking at it from one silo, because they're just there's many different people saying to different degrees they've figured out one of the other major problems in the industry. Let's say it's from the tax side, right? If somebody says they've stamped it, I have 100% locked into science, I know how to sort 280E out. Maybe they do, But if they've not done it in such a way that it is such a blanket statement that something that needs that 50,000-foot approach, like you said, like the FDA, can't stamp it on it, that next stage can't quite get there. Look at the Department of Veteran Services and the VA, right? They can't, no matter how much anecdotal evidence, double-blind, placebo, peer-reviewed academic journals of actual patient experiences over the last 30 to 40 years, let alone what's happening right here in Massachusetts with C3RN launching their veteran study in association with Alternative Treatment for Veterans, where they profiled just under 600 veterans nationally that actually created qualitative and quantitative data on how veterans are using cannabis, CBD and THC, but specifically cannabis as medicine, what it's doing to reduction of their VA-prescribed medicines, how that's affecting them in terms of out-of-pocket expenditures, and what that means for the social contract that originally got those veterans to go to war, that they said, yes, I understand that you, the military, when I get out, if I'm hurt, you will help me in the best way possible. You will cause the least amount of harm to my body. And after some veterans, you know Stephen Mandili and some of these other ones, right, after 10 years of VA-prescribed opioids and fentanyl patches for his heart with a fistful of oxy and all these other stories he's told 100 times, it took him 5 months of a cannabis regimen under a patient care advisor to actually get him to get off pharmacology. So what that actually means is that with all of these things shifting, until there is actually an industrial and an effective lodestar for other people to follow, anybody that has something that is already being jumped on by law enforcement and from federal service as something that, okay, yeah, we can definitely rely on that, where it's such an early part of the game, it's just one of those things, like, sounds great, I'd need to see a lot of field tests on this. I'd need to see a lot of running through the ringer.
That's what they're going to be doing now, because
right,
they have the opportunity to do it. At least now
right,
they have a little plaything they do it, and it seems to be working. David, before we go, can you talk a little bit about how you discovered how cannabis can help your Crohn's disease?
Sure. I moved to Boston for grad school. I ended up graduating early. I went in for an infusion. I would go in every 8 weeks and take 400 milligrams of a drug called Remicade, the original chemotherapy drug. And I went in, it was like mid-August, and they told me my insurance had been dropped.
Okay.
I said okay. There was no notification, no email, no call, no nothing. There's nothing available. So went through 2 days of extremely frustrating phone calls, and eventually I called and said, how much is it out of pocket? I'm getting ready to go to Asia for a few weeks. I don't want any issues while I'm there. What do I have to do to get it? They said it's $1,800. I said great. I'll put it on a credit card. I'll figure it out later. It's not what I want to do, but at this point I don't have enough time, and I'm traveling out of the country to sort it out. My personal health is worth $1,800, so I'll sort it out. I show up the next day for my infusion. It was $18,000.
No.
Oh, they missed it by 1-0.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I'll spare what I said, but
I know what you said. We all know what you said, and I don't blame you at all.
it was tough, but it ended up forcing me to really go full time on cannabis and really find what worked, and found it actually fairly quickly.
And because you're a chef, you can actually infuse it in your daily intake of food. Could you not? Can't
Right,
you not?
which is kind of the whole goal of our business, is to really merge it into people's lives so it's not so medicinal.
Yeah, well, how about that? Well, you've been great. I look
Thank you.
forward to actually sitting at a dinner table with you at some point.
We'll make that
Cloud
happen soon.
Creamery
Yeah.
on Instagram if you'd like
Thank
David
you.
to come to your house and make you some infusions.
Thank you.
And good luck. I know you're heading out to hang out with some pretty impressive people out in California, the other planet, the other planet that is California. And Dan McCarthy, can you stick around for a few minutes more, or do you have to run?
Do you want me here, Jimmy?
I would like to hear from
You guys are friends. You've clarified
I'd like
that.
you to hang out for a few more minutes. Hillary King's on the other side. I want to
got
bring
you.
her in too.
I got you.
All right, cool. Fair enough. Well, now we're going to take another break, and we'll be back with more of We Talk after this.
We are Pro Cannabis Media. Why? Because we are a media company that is pro cannabis.
Cannabis, because those stories are not being told.
We are live streaming from events.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of the live stream from the New England Cannabis Convention. Hey, unbelievable. Here we are again in the Performer TV studios. Hi, everybody. Welcome to We Talk Live. I'm Jimmy Young.
And I'm Curt Dalton from Cannabis.net.
We are blogging on all topics. We are partners with Leafly, Weed Maps, Greenflower, MJ Headline News, Sensi Magazine, and The Weed Tube. We are Weekly News Dabs with Jimmy Young.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of News Dabs. I'm Jimmy Young reporting for the Pro Cannabis Media Group and ProCannabisMedia.com.
From New Orleans, Liz Dameron, Pro Cannabis Media Network.
We are interviewing cannabis experts on the podcast In the Weeds with Jimmy Young.
You were one of the co-authors of Question 4, which paved the way. First of all, how did you get picked for that honor, if you will?
We write laws and regulations. We advocate for them, and we get licenses and keep them compliant.
But I do believe that Bruce is on the phone with us, so Curt, you can take it away as I go into my Rasta mode here.
Bruce, are you there? Can you hear us?
I can hear you guys. I'm just being quiet because I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's a rowdy show tonight, I got to tell you. So I have to lead off right now. You left Canopy Growth, as you said. No, I was fired. The entire cannabis stock market crashed. Did you cause that?
Well, I didn't fire myself, so I don't think so.
We are a digital media company for the cannabis industry, telling their stories in their words.
There's nothing like having patients come back and say, I feel better.
I am confident that Congress is, at the very least in this current Congress, by next year, going to make it legal make it clearly legal for banks to take marijuana accounts, which is a big step forward.
I never thought I'd see the Red Sox win a World Series, let alone 3. Yeah. I never thought I'd see the Patriots win a Super Bowl, let alone 5. This is taped. Okay. It's a whole new world of weed out there.
We are ProCannabisMedia.com. Subscribe today.
The last one, put them on. And we're back. Welcome back to the second hour of Weed Talk. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
Oh, there we go. I'm Curt from Cannabis.net.
Gotta put Curt's mic on. Anytime my mic's on,
I was
I
getting cut.
All right, that's cool. I know it's hard. You're no less important than I am.
Well, I'll move over to your camera. There you go. There you go. Got to be in the good camera.
All right. First of all, right off the bat here, we want to thank some of the supporters of our program here. It is Legal Seafoods, it's Caroline's Cannabis in Uxbridge, and, of course, the Weegit system. We showed a little video of the Weegit system to you. It is a 4-filter titration intake. It's a pipe with a whole bunch of filters, guys, and you can wash it and clean it, and it takes this is the little smoke particles going through one of the filters, and it starts at a 1300 Fahrenheit heat, and it takes it down to 80 degrees Fahrenheit when it goes into your lungs, and it feels smooth, and it's like a vape. It really is. It's very smooth, but you are combusting at the beginning and you are enjoying it at the end. That's Weegets.com, WEEDGETS.com. And remember, if you do order something, please do Weed Talk 2020. It'll get you another 20. Make that 10% off. All right, I'll make up the other 10. All right,
It's on Jimmy.
That's right. It's on me. What can I tell you? Please use it. All right. Now we welcome in a couple of, we welcome in Hillary King, who's back with us. Let me tell you a little bit about Hillary, if you don't mind. And Hillary, you don't know this, but I actually took this right off your LinkedIn profile. Okay. You have an insatiable hunger for knowledge. You have strong interpersonal skills and a diverse hybrid professional background. And you are an undeniable asset to any team. Welcome to our team. I think that's accurate, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Good to see you again.
You too.
And we hung out. We let Dan McCarthy hang out too. So I'm gonna throw this out there to these two guys because they are very much tuned into the scene of cannabis and what's happening politically. If you had to pick one story that really stands out over the last month in the world of cannabis, okay? Dan, I'm going to start with you. What's the biggest story? What's the biggest thing that has happened in the world of cannabis over the last month? And then Hillary will go to you.
The biggest thing in the world of cannabis over the last month. I mean, it really depends on where your periscope's set to. If you are looking at aspects of, as you brought up, politics or social justice, one of the new narratives coming out of the 2020 presidential race is now that New Hampshire has passed and, the front runners are out and the results are there, and now all the new narratives are being restructured, you're seeing candidates getting their backgrounds really dug into. And with all the talk of, say, Bloomberg getting in the race, there's a renewed interest in, obviously, all of his connections with stop and frisk in New York City, which was very disastrous and, unfairly targeted minorities and people of color, and he had to later apologize for it. The cannabis argument has been wrapped up into that. So I think actually over the last month, from what I've been paying attention to, especially because what I've been doing with the Boston Institute of Nonprofit Journalism as we were up in the New Hampshire primary, was I was really focusing on bringing what I'd been focusing on in cannabis for the last 9 or so months and looking at it through the visor of where the candidates stand. While I was up in New Hampshire, as I mentioned earlier, I got to interview a retired Texas police officer that works with a former GOP congressman to do drug policy reform. And what they basically said was, look, we're actually the people that are pulling for Tulsi. Tulsi, her not only her military background far surpasses Mayor Pete in every conceivable way, but she was one of the few actually working to pass bills of reform. Everybody else, and they actually had a lot of bad things to say about Sanders, where they're just like, look, we love Sanders' whole legalization on day one, but until 2016, he wasn't taking any actions at the federal level. Right. It was something that became a campaign stop where Tulsi for years for them had actually worked in hand with Cory Booker. So for me, the last month is the true national stage platform that the legalization movement has really hit as people start to pick their horse in the race.
All right, Hillary, you get your chance now. Tell us a little bit about what you think might be the biggest story, either locally or nationally.
The biggest story I think locally is probably the host community agreement bill that just passed. We could talk about, the story of what's going on in Cambridge, but I think this bill passing will impact that and will impact situations like this across the whole state.
So it won't happen again.
Hopefully.
And that basically, I think that, and you know what, step back for a minute and look at what's been going on in Massachusetts over the first year and a half of adult use legalization of the product. The Cannabis Control Commission has been overwhelmed with things they've had to do. And now this is really the first time that they recognize that there was a problem in the law getting this host security agreement before you even applied for a license. And the legislature has done something about it. And I'm going to give them a round of applause for that.
Hold on.
Yeah, I would give a round of applause to the legislature for that too, but only because they had to. I mean, the commission took a vote sometime in the last year, 4-1, that we don't have the authority to regulate these host community agreements. That's why it required a legislative change.
Well, again, because there was a flaw in the law when it was written. That's as simple. And it also fed the egos of the local towns and also some of the pockets of mayors like Mr. Fall River guy, right? Yeah. Well, how's he doing? I can't even remember his name. What's the mayor's? Come on, Dan. What's the guy's name? Fall River guy.
I absolutely refuse to even give him a moment's more of a platform.
Fair enough. Good job. The Fall River guy.
Let's just say that sort of the archetype villain has yet to be filled in the bad side of the cannabis space within the state, and eventually those heroes and villains always emerge. They do in every single state where legalizations happen until actual federal legalization moves on. But moreover, you've got in the last month Baker's stoned driving bill dead. It's
Hannah Kane's task force bill.
Yep,
dead.
Moved right in the last couple of days. That was moved to study. Pod cafes, social consumption. That's actually being moved forward a bit more.
Yay!
So again, this is the ebb and flow of a settling industry, not only nationally but in the hyper localized way. Everything right down to what's been happening in Cambridge, right the way to the HCO overhaul. And look at the stories that have just come out in the last couple of months. That big one that ran in Forbes, Illinois versus Massachusetts, a tale of two states.
Oof.
Where Illinois took a lot of the great moves and a lot of the stuff that was championed by a lot of the subcommittees and a lot of the great moves that were made for focusing on social equity in concept before some of the shenanigans came in.
Yep.
But those kinds of movements set a precedent that Illinois followed suit in, developed, built upon, and executed in a different way, and some would say better, some would say worse, depending on who you're talking to. But at the end of the day, the fact remains, when they they went adult use when their actual ballot initiative, when the people that spoke, that voted for this, said on this date, this industry needs to be open. On the first day, that state opened with the amount of actual legal cannabis entities that we had 4 to almost 5 years later, unless you're talking about medical going back to 2012. So Massachusetts is starting to drop the ball. It looks like in fits and starts, they're starting to polish and bob and weave a little bit on trying to make up for lost time and maybe start to rectify some of the Byzantine laws and the Byzantine ways that the actual HCA process worked, let alone what's been happening at everything at the lower level, like when David was here, and how those MDAR reports started to affect all the CBD companies that were starting to do hemp-derived CBD distillate compounds in very simple foods, and then that got wiped off the map, let alone then came the actual vape controversy, right? So we've packed a lot into, again, as I keep coming back to, we are in the tectonic plate settling phase of this industry, and it's only the first one. There's earthquakes to come, and then there's settling to come. Until the day of full widespread federal legalization, criminal expungement, social restoration, and the entire thing starts to get wrapped up, we're always going to be in this state. It's like we're on a cooling planet, and people are surprised when volcanoes blow.
Yeah,
you know
but
what
I think this bill is going to go a long way towards correcting just that. Right? Did you hear about that story that happened in Salem, where a cannabis prospective licensee actually sued Salem because their mayor did not agree to enter into a host community agreement. So they claimed that the process was unfair, that these agreements were going to the highest bidder, the people that could fill the city's coffers the most, above and beyond what's allowed in the scope of a host community agreement. And a judge actually sided with Salem, with the mayor, and kind of honored what was baked into the law that needed to be corrected, that these cities and towns have, no pun intended.
Baked into the law.
Yeah, that they have the discretion, so they upheld this mayor's decision to say, no, they don't have to give a host community agreement to anybody. So now this bill is going to hopefully level the playing field a little bit more and hold municipalities accountable for actually accounting for these costs incurred, because it's supposed to be tied to actual expenditures.
Right.
I think on the national and international level, just thinking about the 30-day question, and we do like 300 articles a month, and I get to edit all of them. The cash crunch as the whole industry, just lack of funding from the very top. When the market crashed in Canada, and the ripple effects, the layoffs starting in Canada, now we're seeing them come to the U.S. Not the no ability to declare a bankruptcy, for these pot companies in the U.S. I don't think people on the outside of the industry realize how bad it is. You can't get money publicly. The banks everybody's, even
really
VCs.
Privately right now.
Privately.
Yeah.
Even and it's causing people that took career jumps. If you're like we talked about earlier, CPA, I'm going to do this. I mean, massive. It's just, it's hitting everyone from actually who's selling the product and has revenue, all the way to digital companies that are just going bankrupt, websites that are giving up. It is a huge problem right now that's a little bit underreported, I'd say, for the last 30 days is what I think of.
That's right. And also, when we talked earlier, you talked about what's going on in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Which is just like, speaking of the Wild Wild West, how many licenses
I don't
did they
know.
give
Dan
out?
probably knows about this. So I was on a call with a gentleman from Oklahoma who's got 10,000 acres and another 10,000. So I kind of, I'm a little familiar with the Oklahoma, and I know they had medical. And I go, well, how many dispensaries you guys have? And he goes, hold on, I'm on the Oklahoma, 5,280. I go, you're kidding. That can't be right. That's got to be like applications, right? You don't have 5,000 people in Oklahoma. Well, they do. And they said, how many grow licenses? Because you guys are all farmers out there. 800 grow licenses approved. And what they've done in Oklahoma, as fast forward the story, is kind of done the Oregon thing. Show up at the town hall. I think it was 2,500 for something and 1,000 for something. You're good to go. Thanks for coming in, like an inspection sticker. They literally, you talk about the opposite of Massachusetts.
Right.
There's literally he says he's got 7 dispensaries like in his little downtown road right now open for medical because they don't have rec. Right. They're like, talk about the opposite of like, just let everyone have one. Let's grow it everywhere. And I said, are you guys cornering the southwest of America? Because you touch Texas, you got New Mexico, which just said no to rec this year. And I go, you are just taking that entire swath from east of Vegas and you're going to be the man. You're the Colorado of that area.
And that sort of underscores too, as states have been coming online over the years, right? At the statewide level, the joke's always been like, well, if you're in a state that is, I'm good. If you're in a state that is basically surrounded by legalized states, medical or rec, and your one state is still the holdout. John Oliver years ago did a great on the HBO John Oliver show, did a great segment on marijuana legalization right after the 2016 elections, and he highlighted some veterans that were in I think it was Kentucky, or maybe it was Tennessee, and they were just showing how this has medicinal benefit. Vets are getting their quality of life back and are maintaining their own symptoms, and yet here's the problems with the VA. It was one of those stories. So when you're in a state like Oklahoma and you've got this widespread licensure happening and you've got everybody getting their hand in the pie, it basically means that as the other states start to come online very quickly, as consolidation and market correction begins to happen after the cash crunch, let's say, is lifted and cash is starting to come in, or at least traditional banking services are coming in, or at least the ability for these companies to not actually have the threat of a shutdown happen specifically because of paperwork that was overlooked months ago. And you're talking about small businesses. You're talking about people that took out mortgages. You're talking about people like River Run Gardens, these guys that were just month after month after month just laying out cash on the table saying, why is this taking so long? I'm draining all of my resources. At the dark side of the industry, at the very top, there's a lot of entities that are waiting for some of those fires to burn out so they can come in and pick up what's left of the ashes and then sweep into these companies that maybe 6 months ago, maybe 3 months ago, we're still in a position to actually argue and retain certain amounts of equity to get certain cash injections. You're going to have bad people in the industry that they're more than amply out there, but they're going to start to come into the state when they see that the states, a lot of the businesses are at a certain vulnerable point, and they might just get swept up with a large multinational. Now, hopefully, when the fourth estate is doing their job and when the press has come forward and actually put some of these dodgy HCAs months ago out under the spotlight. No pun intended to the Boston Globe, but I guess pun intended. It was their spotlight series,
and they did well.
Yeah, they do. And as they were covering that and starting to bring this issue to light, fast forward months later, and we're all sitting on a podcast talking about how the CCC did vote 4-1, that they were not wrangle and control, and then the actual community raised up and said something has to be done. This is clear and wanton abuse. I personally, when I was covering Question 4 in 2016, went to a special town hall through the town of Milford and listened to people stand up at these town halls and saying, I've actually moved here because the last town I was in, I went up to the town manager with my EEP paperwork filled out. They had all the different qualifiers to make sure that they were getting to the front of the line as a small business with economic empowerment, and a town manager looked at them and said, yeah, well, this company promised us $12 million, so it's my choice. Basically, because there's no actual governing body to step in and say there is actual aspects of how these negotiations are happening that are not only going against the letter of the law, they're going against the spirit, right? And that's where the community is really rising up in different ways in Massachusetts. You're getting these outbursts at these CCC meetings that got all this local and national attention. And then yet, as say what you will about civil disobedience, on two sides of the coin, it sort of worked on one hand, and then the second time it happened, it just became a spectacle. But you're getting people that are reaching their breaking point, because you are getting people that are basically about to go under while they were trying to get something off the ground that should have been an egalitarian measure, that we had enough states that had tried it before that did it wrong, and we had the right spirit, and then somewhere along the way that spirit got twisted and mangled.
Well,
and now we're in the pickup phase.
I think it needs to be said too that there's a lot of this as a result of a disconnect in the equity provisions of the law. So the Cannabis Control Commission, they have the mandate to include people that have been disproportionately harmed by the war on drugs. They have the mandate to include people from certain areas and zip codes. So that's why we have economic empowerment and social equity at the state level, is because they have the legal mandate. Municipalities in Massachusetts do not have the same requirement. So that's kind of a barrier to the CCC actually succeeding in those goals. So I know they get a lot of crap, but it's certain, ways in which the system is kind of the foundation had been laid that some of it's out of their hands. And, that's why I think legislation like this HCA bill is going to hopefully help course correct.
Yeah. What's amazing to me is it instead of helping new business grow, they've done everything they can to make it slow. And it has really frustrated hundreds of thousands of people who want to get into this industry at the beginning. And I'm not going to keep knocking politicians, but they're in charge here. They're supposed to do what the people want them to do. And the people have voted, and the people want it to happen, and it's not happening.
And that's not obviously a shock. I mean, look what happened after 2016, right? Question 4 passed with a majority. And it took 6 months for the legislature up on Beacon Hill to actually take the matter seriously and begin to enact the early stages of how this law will be enacted, what the early mandates were going to be as they were going to build something from scratch. Now, I do applaud the CC. I'm not here to bash them. I mean, there are good and bad aspects to it all. I always applaud Shailene Title, but there have been efforts that have moved forward. There have been efforts that have moved forward that, in their way, have put us 2 steps back. This is a collective effort. This is a community and an industry getting off the ground on the local level. And because there are all of these different fiefdoms, right? There are all these different tribes within localized cannabis, let alone the national cannabis scene. But specifically within the local market, you're already starting to see this fractured, almost Fibonacci sequence cultural impact, where we keep splitting everything in halves. And every time you've got 2 polarized ideals on the same matter, all in theory fighting for the same thing, eventually something sets it off where it cuts that in half, and now there's 2 more camps, and now there's 2 more camps. And that kind of infighting and disarray is going to be present the longer people remain frustrated, and the longer these businesses getting off the ground are either A, not getting there fast enough, and it's the hurry up and wait game, or they're watching other things get there quicker and with the greater avenue of resources afforded to certain entities that might have had more resources, more capital, more backing, more political influence. The same things that plagued the 6 months after Question 4 passed, and all of these legislators had 6 months to actually get things in motion, and they started working on things right towards the end. And you had Jim Borghesani and all these activists and all these people at the State House were literally stomping down their door being like, the clock's, you can't keep passing this off. And when that actual rushed attitude infected the early days, there were some early corrections. But what we're seeing right now is an industry that's yawning to life, where it should have been dawning to life, right? And that's
man, you have such a way with words. Have you ever thought about
yawning?
You got that? Write that one down.
I'm going up tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean that was brilliant. Hillary, you're kind of a champion of the people here. I hope that's okay if you're willing to.
How do you
take
feel
that
about
on.
that? You all right?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
And since you're the only female in this room, I want to ask a question about the role of the female in the cannabis space, because I have met some of the most incredible people that I've met in business, in the cannabis business, are females. They're passionate about it. They want to be part of something. And I also believe that this is an opportunity for the female to really own a more, instead of a niche, a larger part of a growing industry, because industry in this country has been dominated by males for generations. This is a great opportunity for the females out there, whether they be scientists or business people or whomever it is, to get involved. You know these people. I know you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the industry overall is an opportunity to kind of do things in a different way. And a lot of the kind of things that I would indicate or imply are kind of the ways in which, masculinity, the patriarchy has kind of imprinted on, the way everybody does business and like our entire economic system. And cannabis, this industry, we say it's a new industry, but it's really been around, for such a long time that now that it's such a unique thing to have something that's existed now, trying to be coming above ground, these networks and what the legal regulated industry is trying to interrupt runs deep, so it's an opportunity to kind of establish, if the state and the legal and regulatory environment would allow it, to set up different structures around the way we do business that's not so dominating and extractive and monopolies and crush the competition and, that kind of, extractive masculine style. And, there's tons of great female leadership around, the cannabis industry in Massachusetts. It's amazing. We all actually had a get together the first week of the new year at Beth Waterfall's house. Lots of really strong women in this industry that I'm seeing, nominated for a lot of awards next week at NECAN as well. So yeah, you're totally right, and I hope more females, whether they're pivoting from another industry or already involved, try to step up to the plate, because we need all kinds of ideas, including the more feminine, energetically.
Right, I get you. And Curt, I know you've been on the national scene a lot longer than I have, certainly. What do you see as far as the evolution of the female in the cannabis industry?
Certainly seeing it from a grassroots level, like you covered the Vegas,
the Women in Cannabis Conference.
Yep. We had done a pretty controversial piece with Stormy Simon.
Why did you say it was controversial? Just let's talk about it. Go ahead.
I was not aware of the phrase "the glass cliff" before doing some investigating on this piece and getting an interview with Stormy Simon, who is the new CEO of High Times, who I feel is a very nice person and was very gracious in her interview. But I get a feeling there's the phrase "the glass cliff" is bringing in a female presence at a high level when a company is on the precipice of failure and a lot of bad things are going to happen.
So you think they're setting her up for failure?
Yeah, from the interview and from talking to her and doing some background work, it feels like something's amiss in this CEO position, that she is being set up for the fall when the High Times IPO will eventually, I feel, fail, and their books become public. And that Stormy, even though she's a CEO of a very famous media publication, is being kind of put out there for the slaughter when the stuff hits the fan. So that plays into, yes, we want females in these roles, but not because they're getting set up for failure by male-dominated. Right. Well, that's my opinion, and you can read the interview. It's a pretty different interview than you'll read as far as with there's not a lot of softball questions, I'll say that. And it got a little hairy, as we'll say.
Well, since I'm a softball guy,
yep.
I too interviewed her before she became the CEO of High Times at that Women in Cannabis Conference, and just to tell her story. So at least you can hear her story, and then you can flip over to Curt's to see where she's at now. Dan, High Times. They have been around longer than anybody, and they've had a lot of, I don't know, did they make a few business mistakes along the way? Did they have too much product? I mean, would you tell me what's your feeling about how High Times has kind of screwed up their number one brand?
Well, I mean, it depends who you're talking to. I mean, I'm sure if you talk to Stormy Simon, she's got very keen intentions, and I don't know Stormy personally, but I know sort of people in her orbit, and a lot of people have high confidence in her. High Times is an interesting case. Anytime you watch something come out of the subculture and kind of go through the prism and sometimes the poison chalice of coming out of the subculture and be accepted into the mainstream as much as it can be, you're going to have a changed animal. Look at what happened with Vice. Vice for years was one particular entity, and then as it came through, got corporate backing, and now, longtime watchers don't care anything about it. I see a lighter.
That's right. You get it.
You about 30 seconds to go, I guess.
Isn't that a great thing? You get the red light going. We don't have a red light camera, though. That's the thing. We know that it's going on, but there's a red light blinking, and it's telling us we got a minute to go before we take our next break. And in this break, pretty sure this is the one that we did with Sensi Connect night, Tuesday night at Sonia's in Cambridge, and got to meet a lot of really nice people down there, including the Salient System securities that are out there. And there's so many ancillary businesses out there that are flourishing because they see the opportunity to sell their wares into the cannabis space, and Salient is certainly one of them. And I just thought I'd throw that out there because you're going to see what being in a network environment is and how much fun it can be. And I give credit also to one of our partners, Sensi Magazine, who of course was the host of Sensi Connect at Sonia's. Check it out. You want a prescription for a good weeknight out? Put a little food, drink, and music together, and now add a little cannabis, and bingo, you got it. That's what Sensi Magazine does with their Connect Nights, Sonia's live music venue in Cambridge, The Place, on Tuesday, where a few hundred cannabis business people got together to meet and grow, not the weed, but their businesses.
2020 here this year, we're seeing a lot of brands start to come to fruition. We're seeing a lot of retail and cultivators start to connect with each other and do business amongst each other, which is going to be great. And so we are kind of giving environments where that can be fostered.
It's so crucial, honestly, across the way. It's so crucial to have networking events like Sensi. Sensi opens up the pathway to success in businesses like ours. You know, as we're trusted advisors in our industry, we want to be that source. We want to be that person that somebody comes to us and says, hey, teach us how to be the best, how to do the best. And so that's, you know, these events help us to grow our business, our partnerships, and through connections.
Referrals and connections are what helps build any business relationship, and the cannabis business is no different. Every day of its existence, it gets closer and closer to a new normal where cannabis is just like any other product on the market.
We need to make this a normal, everyday thing, just as you would with any other consumable product out there. And this is just another one of those things. And yeah, you know, it's going to take some time. It'll take a little bit of digging to get there, but we're going to get there, and I think we're going in a good direction.
People in the cannabis industry are looking for people they can trust, because it's about respect and it's about trust. And those are what we offer.
I like respect and trust. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Pro Cannabis Media's We Talk with Jimmy Young. That would be me. I'm the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and my sidekick on this show is
Curt from Cannabis.net. And we still have Hillary King here. There she is. So we're all back. And we lost Dan. Wait a minute. Not all of us. We lost Dan.
That's what we were saying about it. Dan McCarthy, who,
Yes.
is just, there he is. He's the empty chair now.
Yes.
Which is okay. He did a great job, and he really helped us out today, kind of fill the void, if you will. And I don't want to get into details because it's not worth it. But I do want to thank our supporters, because it is time to thank our supporters. Legal Seafoods and Caroline's Cannabis from Uxbridge. And one of our cool little products is the Weedget, and even though I've misplaced mine, we do have an example coming up in just a few seconds that you can see this really cool titration system. It's a 4-filter titration system that cools the smoke from when it gets inflamed, when you actually light the bowl, and then the little bubbles, I guess, are the tiny bubbles, are going through this one channel after another, and then going through another filter, and then another filter, and then another filter before it gets into your lungs and cools the smoke down to 80 degrees. It's a smooth draw. You can clean this, and it's a great way to enjoy your favorite substance. And that is the Weedgets.com site, WEEDGETS.com. Make sure you use Weed Talk 2020 so you can get 10% off. It's only $40. So, you know what? Save some money. Check it out. I think you'll enjoy it. And plus, that little tip at the end also has a little filter on the end, and you can stick a pre-roll in there or a self-roll in there. And it, again, gives you a more filtered enjoyment of the cannabis plant. So that's what we're going to do. In a few minutes, we're going to talk to Morgan Fox. He's the Media Communications Director of the NCIA, the National Cannabis Industry Association. They're holding a show in Boston next week on Wednesday and Thursday, and PCM will be there. And there's some great speakers, and I've already got a one-on-one with the keynote guy, who I'm going to just throw it out there. I hope you guys are going to be at that show. I know that we can offer some discounts, too.
Yep, I was going to say I don't want to make you nervous, but we got the red light on again. So does that mean Morgan Fox isn't coming on?
No. The red light.
No, wait a minute. Red light's off.
Derek Kayango is the guy that is the keynote there, and he has an incredible story behind him. And he's the founder of the Global Soap Project, a humanitarian aid organization that collects discarded and unused soap from thousands of hotels worldwide, reprocesses it, and then distributes it to in-need populations around the world. Now, I know for a fact that there are people out there of the greatest generation that hello, goodbye. I have no idea who that was, unless it was Dan, that hoard the little soaps. You know, when you get down to the bottom.
Hotels?
No, just people in general.
Right.
I know for a fact. I can't remember who did it, but I remember when they were cleaning out this woman's apartment. And they're saying, and she, because she lived through the Depression, she wanted to hold on to every little sliver of soap just in case. And now there's another, sure enough, there's a way to use them again. I like that.
Yep. Good thinking.
I like that.
Let me ask you a question. How, if somebody wanted to sponsor our show and be on the show,
Yes,
like
sir.
like a CBD medic
Okay,
here?
that's Perry Entelman's group.
Perry Entelman. This is Gronk.
This is Ron
Gronk
Gronkowski's
CBD.
company. We have all sorts of.
How
little
does a
things.
company contact you to get sponsored? Like if we wanted to put a big 5-foot this thing back here, like a prop or a brand, how does a brand get on this show?
Info at Pro Cannabis Media comes into my inbox, and then I, of course, return the call. And now I'm also being told this is the universal sign for someone's on the phone, right? And that someone is Morgan Fox from the NCIA down in Washington, D.C., in the trenches. Hey, Morgan, how are you doing, man?
Hey, Jimmy.
Hey, yeah, you must be excited to come back up to Boston and run what used to be called the Seed to Sale show, but now it's the Northeast Cannabis Business Expo? Did I do it right?
The Northeast Cannabis Business Conference. Yeah,
there you go.
It looks like it's going to be really exciting.
And I just talked about one of your keynote speakers, Derek Kayango. Can you give us a little bit more? I looked at the roster of your speakers, and it's truly a who's who in the cannabis industry, not just from locally here in the Northeast, but really around the world.
Well, I think that there are going to be a lot of interesting opportunities to learn a lot from everything from the actual nuts and bolts of working in the industry and a number of different processes and technologies, but specifically a lot of things on the policy side as well. We like to offer as broad of a educational forum as possible. But I think that one of the most exciting things is going to be the panel featuring the results of the Illicit Market Summit, which is going to be happening before the conference. And then on Thursday morning, they're going to the panel of regulators, members of NCIA, and various other groups will be presenting these the findings, basically of best practices and recommendations for public and private partnerships with law enforcement and government agencies and stakeholders in the industry to try to eliminate the illicit market through humane and creative methods.
Well, that was the whole point, I thought, of legalization, was to actually be able to track where it's from. No more parking lot rendezvous. It's that is one of the things that I was most intrigued about, and I certainly welcome that and champion that as well, because I do want to know where it came from, what it's going to do for me before I partake as a medicinal user of cannabis. So I think,
absolutely.
Yeah,
we
that's the whole
really need
point.
to get this substance regulated and tested so the consumers know what they're getting. Unfortunately, cannabis businesses have so many unnecessary financial burdens placed on them that it's very difficult for them to be able to compete with the illicit market, which can undercut them on prices. And for a certain portion of the population, price matters more than anything else.
No question. Now, can you bring us up to date on what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now? Because I got a letter from the NCIA to Mike Crapo, the senator, I think he's from Idaho, to get going, get off your schneid, and get the vote on the Safe Banking Act through. How possible is that going to happen in what is going on in Washington, D.C. now, which has been, let's just say, challenging?
Now that the Senate can get back to the normal flow of business, I'm very hopeful that we're going to see a markup on the Safe Banking Act very soon. Unfortunately, Senator Crapo has a number of concerns about the bill as well as about cannabis policy reform in general that are not directly related to banking issues. So we're trying to urge him to really just address this bill in terms of the narrow intent that it was designed for, which is to allow banking access for legal cannabis businesses and allow traditional lending for small businesses as well. So hopefully we'll be able to convince him to do that and move forward with the version that was overwhelmingly passed in the House last year. Right now, there are a lot of industry groups and advocates that are working night and day to make sure that he's educated and getting the right information and trying to work with other members of the Senate Banking Committee to try to move that through.
With the divisiveness that has really stalled government in Washington, D.C. over the last few weeks, months, if you will, are you confident that you guys can get this thing done, get it going again? There seems to be so much backbiting and finger pointing and, you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, you're good, you're bad, you're good, you're bad. I mean, that doesn't work with a true democracy, does it?
Well, actually, I think that that's something that might work in our favor in this particular instance. I get the feeling that Congress really needs to show the American people that they can still legislate and do their jobs. And the Safe Banking Act is a bipartisanly supported bill that addresses a public health issue upon which the vast majority of Americans agree upon, and it's something that they can actually get done in this session in terms of the time available. So honestly, I think that it's an excellent vehicle for them to restore or to try to restore faith in the legislature in terms of the eyes of Americans.
I'm with you, Morgan. I'm with you on that. If you need any help with that, just call me. I'll call. I mean, I'm from Massachusetts. I'm going on a limb thinking our senators are pretty pro-cannabis at this point.
Morgan, this is Curt from Cannabis.net. What, other than being obviously supporting pro-cannabis candidates coming into November, what is the NCIA looking at coming into November's elections, or what are they supporting or really focusing on, other than the obvious, right? Candidates that support cannabis. Is there certain areas of the country or certain districts or elections that you're really looking at as an organization to try to support come voting day?
Well, I think that just over the course of the year, aside from supporting the Safe Banking Act in the Senate and working to get a House floor vote for the MORE Act, there are probably going to be a number of other bills being considered. So we're going to try to push them along as far as we can, given that a lot of attention is going to be diverted to electoral politics as usual. In terms of things to look out for in November, there may be more than 10 states that are looking at various either medical or adult use ballot initiatives. Some of them have already gotten approved, like in South Dakota. So those definitely a number of states that should be watched. And the Northeast in particular, in terms of state legislatures, is going to be a hotbed of activity this year. We're looking at New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, possibly Delaware. We're looking at movement in New Hampshire and Vermont. Things are really progressing at an increasing rate.
Not fast enough for me, but at least it's going in the right direction. Hillary, you got something?
The sort of progress is unprecedented, but I think that it's only going to accelerate.
I think so too. Hillary, you got something?
Yeah.
For Morgan?
Hey, Morgan. This is Hillary King. What do you think about the recent news that President Trump didn't include protections for states in the federal budget? What do you think that's about?
Honestly, I think that it's sort of just him trying to make sure that nobody tells the Department of Justice what to do in terms of what laws they're going to enforce. But we're extremely confident that Congress will once again include those protections in the appropriations bill. And Representative Matt Gaetz from Florida, well-known Trump supporter, but also a supporter of cannabis policy reform, has gone on record as saying that he doesn't think that this is going to stop those protections from being added at all.
Yeah, I would hope not. I mean, at a certain point, it's kind of on the wrong side of history on this one.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the fact that it was included in the base bill last year and very easily passed, I think it just shows that it's, protection medical cannabis programs is just a non-issue for Congress at this point. Ideally, we'd like to see those protections extended to adult use states through the McClintock Amendment. But I think we're going to have to just see how that plays out. But that's definitely something that we're going to be working towards.
Hey, Morgan, following up to exactly what Hillary asked, the provisions for, was it the DEA and the FDA to kind of study cannabis and CBDs, is that the good news in Trump's act? If the trying to pull back the protections, which will be put back in, is there any silver lining in what you saw Trump put towards CBD and education?
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly tremendous demand for research and for clarity in terms of where the FDA stands on CBD, and I think that this is just a natural reaction to that. I don't know if $5 million is going to be enough to expedite this process in a rapid manner, but at least it's something, and the fact that it's being explicitly mentioned, I think, is pretty important.
And pretty amazing. I mean, I continue to pinch myself that in 2020, we're actually talking about these subjects in Washington, D.C., in our local communities. And, it truly is a whole new world of weed out there. And everybody is learning more and more and more about it. One of the frustrating things that I have as far as media goes on this, Morgan, is that there's no public service announcements in traditional media that are educational in nature on the cannabis side of things. Now, each state obviously has different rules about that, and it's frustrated me a lot here in Massachusetts that I still haven't seen that, so that the public, again, is being... they're still living in the past. All they know is what's been told to them over the last 80 years, which we all know is bunk. And no one is saying, look, if you have this symptom, if you use this, it may actually help you. Get educated. Go to this site. We ever see, and you know what happened at the Super Bowl last year when Acreage tried to run a public service announcement with 3 amazing stories, and of course, it got nixed by the network. Are we ever going to see public service announcements that are pro-cannabis?
Well, I think that they've occurred in some places before, but I think there's still a lot of stigma associated around it, and particularly governmental agencies sometimes are a little bit loath to get involved in that. But luckily, we have the internet and social media, and I think that has been one of the biggest propellant for information about cannabis and its potential health benefits, as well as the overwhelming benefits of ending prohibition socially.
And you know what? Cannabis.net has all that information on it. You didn't mind me telling people
that's a
that,
plug
right? I know
there.
it's a plug. And by the way, you check out your site, and you can spend hours sifting through. How many pieces of content do you put up there almost every day, Curt?
15. Not all just on the site, but 15 about total through all the social media. But speaking of plugs, Morgan, for people in Massachusetts that aren't as familiar, this is your inaugural one up here. B2B show. Who should go? How do people get tickets? What can they expect? Give us the plug.
Honestly, I think that anyone should go. It's really a wonderful opportunity to get educated, but particularly if you're interested in any aspect of the cannabis industry or in cannabis policy, it's a wonderful resource. And again, the results of the summit on Thursday are, I think, going to be really amazing. It's something that's never been done before, and we're really looking forward to seeing the results of that. But that's Thursday in Boston from on the 19th and 20th.
Yep.
And you can find out more about that at thecannabisindustry.org.
That's what we're looking for, cannabisindustry.org. And if you do search the NCIA, National Cannabis Industry Association, there's a whole bunch of stuff that'll come up. Morgan Fox, you know what? This is the second time you've been on our show, and I thank you immensely for your time. And the best part is, I know the last time you were sick, and it sounds like you're feeling better now, right?
Oh, yeah, luckily.
Great. Well, we'll see you next week, yes?
Yeah, unfortunately, I won't be able to be there, but I'll be there in spirit.
All right, fair enough. But Morgan Fox, thank you again for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Morgan.
You bet. Actually, I feel so much better now about the Trump thing, because that was a big deal. It came across as like an alert.
Oh, it was. The headline, the clickbait was
right.
Trump's ending all protection for medical marijuana.
I mean, we've got bigger fish to fry, don't you think?
It's a 90%.
Him. He's the bigger fish. I'm sorry, but he is the,
I think it's like up to 70% even with Republicans who represent states with medical programs as well as rec creating nice tax dollars. That was never going to get through. Like, people are like, whoa, no, that's protected. So
let's hope so. And never a dull moment. Now, Miss Hillary King, you have asked me about my lighter.
Oh, yeah.
So you got to show this.
Product review time.
This is product review time. And Hillary always finds the coolest gadgets and gizmos.
There's your camera.
And
let's see it.
Now you can show right to your camera so you can see how it works. Look, ask me about my lighter.
Flicker World. So this is the Flicker lighter. Isn't this cool? It's like a combo fidget spinner and lighter.
Well, that's stress relief right there.
Right?
Yep.
I mean, I don't usually carry like a lighter around in my pocket necessarily, but I have been for the last couple days since I got this from at Sensi Night, actually.
Right. Sensi Connect.
It's a little addicting, These guys, too, that started this company, they're just a couple of like local young entrepreneurs that just have such a great attitude. That's what I love about them, is that they're always just so positive, such a class act. So this is just a cool little thing. It's 3D printed. I could see these being like a cool swag item for companies and brands to have their logo, their branding on them.
And you can't use it while it's spinning, right? I mean,
no,
you can't. Right?
I don't know. I mean,
that would hurt.
I bet
it would definitely hurt at some point.
Give this to some YouTubers or TikTokers, and I'm sure we would see some, some Flickr tricks. But
I get you. You
Yeah.
You can always try anything when you're feeling good. Let's just
Yeah.
say.
Also, shout out to Leandro. He's also he's one of the founders of Flickr. He's also got a podcast called The Enlightened Millennial.
Ooh.
Got a lot of great content for young entrepreneurs and motivated millennials. So definitely
And I don't
check that out.
I absolutely do not qualify for that. I just want to say I've got a kid who's a millennial, but that's about it. I am definitely painfully unhip and all that, but I do like some of the gizmos and certainly the younger approach to this industry when you come on our show. And I always, you know how I feel about you.
Thanks, Jimmy.
So Curt, question again. Let's go back to the big picture here in Massachusetts. I believe there were 3 more dispensaries that opened. We're still in, 33, 36 open? Is that the number, guys?
High 30s? Have we hit 40?
High 30s.
37, 38? Is that rec? That's rec, right?
Adult use rec.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of those were already existing as medical, though.
Yes.
Well, and hang on a second.
And Kobe, your friend Kobe,
my
first
friend
one in Boston.
Kobe Evans, Pure Oasis has gotten their final licensing and is just waiting for their commence operations. And I know that there's been another delay. He's just overwhelmed with all the stuff that's going on. But I guarantee, and I told him this, I said, you got to get us there for the opening because in a lot of ways that's going to be a historic moment because they've been waiting for. It'll be 3.5 years after the question passed that we'll finally see an adult use dispensary in the city of Boston at Grove Hall, right across from the Franklin Park Zoo. I'm pretty sure, right in Dorchester.
I think we do a live broadcast, like go location, mics on, opening bell.
And the only thing we're going to need is somebody who will underwrite that and support that.
Or a mobile studio, which we're trying to get going.
That's right. We were, yes, indeed. We were going to have a big announcement, and you know what? We'll get there. I am too determined to not make this. I want to make this happen, and we'll get there one way or another, for sure. So, guys, a little bit more about what is next on cannabis.net. What can we look for, and why should people go to your site, Curt? And why do they spend so much time on your site?
It's a super interactive site, so you have the full mapping to check out all cannabis businesses, not just the usual dispensaries and doctors. So you'll have attorneys on there if you want to start a business, talk about CBD. There's a job board for all cannabis jobs that are open right now across the country. It's a full social network, so if you have questions about growing, you want to put up pictures, you want to ask about a strain for anxiety, we have a lot of that going on the social network. We have an events calendar that covers North America, so you can type in your zip code. It will tell you all the way from if there's a painting night that features a CBD product, all the way to the big shows like NCIA. Obviously, we put up a lot of content in video and text every day, but a little more opinionated, a little more than just republishing a press release about something. We'll certainly take an opinion on something and ask for comments and stuff like that. So a lot to do on there.
You repurpose social media information pretty regularly. You're always out there looking for different things. I mean, I got something like 8 to 10 newsletters a day in my inbox. Is traditional media finally, are they getting any more normal as far as the coverage goes? Because right now social media seems to be dictating the direction of the cannabis industry.
I would say it depends on the ownership group. If it's a kind of Republican conservative ownership of a certain newspaper, without getting into names, you're not going to see a lot of pro-cannabis stuff. But obviously, if it's a more liberal-based media source, and obviously with so many people, at least in favor of medicinal, which is like 90%, even over.
91%.
You need people to read your stuff. You need clicks. That's how advertisers like. That's what authors like. So it would be kind of going against the grain, much like politicians against this subject. Hey, if you get 90% of the people want to hear about this and to support it, maybe your article should also reflect that.
And again, I keep harping on the public service announcement. Some doctor, some medical company needs to step up and underwrite the production of this, because there are ways to get the messages out that will enlighten people about the proper usage of this product. And it hasn't happened yet in my home state, and I keep harping on it, and maybe one day we'll actually produce it. Info at Pro Cannabis Media if you want to talk to me or blast me, whatever you want to do.
Well, you actually gave the Globe a plug tonight, and you throw around compliments for the Globe like manhole covers.
But I love the hang on.
Dan Adams, the Globe has their own staff working on this stuff.
Hang on, let's not name names.
Naomi,
okay?
Felicia,
and we like, and I love the Daily Rip. I love the Daily Rip. I love Felicia and Naomi. Okay, and let's leave Dan alone for a second. Okay, let's just leave it alone for a second. I love the Globe. Do not get me wrong. I read it every single day, but I start in the sports section because that's my love. That's my passion. I mean, I've probably read 98% of every word Bob Ryan has ever written in that Boston Globe newspaper.
You wake and bake to the sports section, and
I do not wake and bake. First of all, hey, on the clock, off the clock. We could talk about that. Okay, I get that, but yeah, I mean, I always start with the sports section. Right. I know how big a Celtics fan you are, as am I, and I'm very encouraged about that. But let's go back to Hillary just for a second. Let's get her involved in this. What are the biggest challenges that you see the cannabis industry facing in the next, again, 60, 90 days, both in Massachusetts and tell me.
Financing.
Money.
It's
really bad.
Yeah, it's
really bad.
kind of, if you're watching, and obviously Curt keeps his finger on the pulse of news across the country, but the cannabis related stocks, if you look at that segment of the stock market, and it's kind of a bloodbath out there. And so I think we might start to see a lot of companies kind of fall off and not survive this, but the ones that do are going to be the ones with access to financing and, most importantly, like a clear path to revenue. Right? Because that's been a lot of why this crisis is kind of happening, is because people aren't actually making the kind of money, that they were projecting to. So, I think that's probably going to be the biggest challenge, especially for, bringing it back home. Companies in Massachusetts that are, though the path is kind of being cleared for licensure, they're still going to hit a wall of needing money to open up their businesses that's not coming, from like predatory investors that are going to try to control more than what's fair. I think that's kind of...
It's a cash crunch out there, no doubt.
Cash crunch.
Do you know any female-based investment group in the cannabis space? Oh. Because that, when you talk about big marijuana and big money, it's male-dominated. I mean, it just is right now. How is that ever going to change? You get what I'm saying? I mean, it's almost like they're controlling and dictating the investment. And if they're losing money, and by the way, you only invest what you can lose in business, right, Curt?
Yeah.
I mean, I learned that the hard way.
Well, a lot of people did, with like Hillary said, we've had our first bubble crash.
Yep.
We had the excitement, and it's a pot leaf, and oh my God, it's going to be huge. And we had the crash with Bruce leaving. Canopy kind of, like we said, kind of started that. We're back to reality, and exactly like Hillary said.
We're in another bubble too, though. I mean, look what's going on with MedMen and.
Oh yeah, they're hurting as well. I mean, we're talking distressed debt, no way to declare a bankruptcy by U.S. bankruptcy laws. Canada's kind of saying, not really, sorry guys. And will we have another bubble again? Absolutely, with federal legalization. When all the trillions around the world can flow into this without fear of repercussion from the United States, yes, we will have another bubble. But right now, it is, as we said over and over, it is a bloodbath out there for getting. Investors want to see revenue. They're very tight with a buck. There's no more dreaming about, I want to own a dispensary, and who cares what the numbers look like. That's gone, and it's tough.
Yeah. And also, federal legalization will relieve the burden of Chapter 280E in the tax code, which is another reason why a lot of cannabis companies are struggling towards profitability.
And this election, again, is probably going to be certainly the most historic in my lifetime. There's no doubt.
I think so.
Everybody knows which side of the fence I'm on, and the fact that I even go near the fence is ridiculous because I'm way on the left. I'm a radical from the 60s, and what can I tell you? That's just how I was brought up. There's been a lot of injustices in the cannabis space and in cannabis businesses specifically, and I just want to see them succeed because there's so many things. I saw hundreds of thousands of jobs into America. They have raised millions of dollars in taxes that are going back into the towns, right? I mean, all of these are the good things. No other industry that has accomplished so much has been vilified so much. That's what bothers me. And again, it's my friends in the old traditional media. They're looking for reasons for this industry to fail and falter, and that bothers me.
That's happening now. There's failures. There's, like Hillary said, for those that don't know, 280E means you cannot write off basic things that legal businesses under the federal law can. So I think it's wages,
business expenses, business services.
You cannot
like
write
tax,
off. You
your
cannot
legal
basically write
fee.
off your expenses.
Yeah.
And people think there's margins of like 300% on the flour, so who cares? That's not true. So if you're a business who couldn't write anything off legally because you're federally illegal, it's pretty hard to stay in business when you can't write off any expenses. I don't care what your margins are. So that's and again, I just saw something today about the taxes are really killing California companies because they have to pay them up front, and there's just not enough cash to do everything.
And this is why I say if you really want a solid investment in the cannabis space, find a law firm, because the lawyers are doing great because they're interpreting new laws, and they haven't even gone to court to challenge some of the things like this that are happening, right?
Yeah, I think one of the things Dan brought up too is that it's a buyer's market. There's assets for pennies on the dollar, and you want to keep those predatory MSOs, whoever it's going to be, just coming in and just scooping really good companies and people up and just becoming, the evil empire, if we take Larry Lucchino phrase. How does that not happen if they're the only ones with money a year from now?
That's right. Well, again, guys, we do this once a month here at the Performer TV studios in Quincy. We do this weed talk thing, and then we cut it up and distribute it into little podcasts. So, whether we do this and we have millions of people watching us live or not, all this content is available on demand on the Pro Cannabis Media YouTube channels and on the Facebook pages of Pro Cannabis Media as well. And now we go to work because now we take 2 hours and we chop it up into about 15 different pieces. And I really appreciate, Hillary. Your presence is helpful and wonderful. You have great insight. And again, a thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Glad to be here.
Curt Dalton, always a pleasure
Always
at
fun.
cannabis.net.
Yep.
Mike Zodos is our technical director and keeps it all together. Dan French is running around doing all the different things that you need to do to put this program on the air.
He's eating all the
or
ice cream.
on the internet. Is he eating all the ice cream?
Probably eating all the ice cream by now.
And it's non-infused. I want to make sure, just in case anybody knows, we're not going to be on the roads with any kind of influence under us, at least not because we're here. Okay?
Consume responsibly.
Please do. Right. In fact, that's my closing line, as you know.
Oh, sorry, I stole it from you.
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. It's a whole new world of weed.
Yep.
Use it responsibly. I'm Jimmy Young for everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media. Thanks for watching. We Talk. We'll be back next month.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.